Welcome to the 10th annual Cobble Beach Concours d'Elegance. I'm David Shearman, and we're back here on a beautiful summer, yes, it's still summer, sunny morning here at Cobble Beach, and the cars are absolutely shining. Good to have you here because I've got some cars I want to show you, some exceptional vehicles that have appeared for this Concours d'Elegance. So let's go. I'm here with Al Webster, and this happens to be one of my favorite vehicles. It's a 1937 Cord 812, and it's got modern features like front-wheel drive, and is it turbo supercharged? It's turbocharged.
It's supercharged.
It's supercharged.
Yes.
I'm here with Al Webster, and he has owned this car for how many years?
55 years.
Well, it's in exceptional condition for a 55-year-old car that you've owned, or a car that you've owned for 55 years.
Yeah, well, it's one that I wanted all my life when I was a young kid.
Yes.
Around Willowdale, I saw one driving and it was a sedan or something, but I couldn't believe it, you know, so all my life I had to have one, so
I get it.
I finally bought this one off a guy by the name of Len Imke, which is he was had many dealerships down in Columbus, Ohio.
Right.
And he was a real car collector. And he and Dave Thomas started Wendy's.
Right, yes.
And I bought and sold a few cars off him, and he always wanted to give me some Wendy's stock at the time. And I thought, what are you, crazy? I want stock. I wasn't anything in the stock market. I wanted cars.
Right.
So,
but at the same time, if you'd taken that stock,
yeah, I think it would have been well worth my while.
Just fine. Now, the thing about this car, it's supercharged, and those are the exhaust pipes, correct?
Yes, I'll open the hood for you.
We can open the hood, absolutely. Let's take a look. There we go. So you can see that.
Yeah, you can see the exhaust come right out of the top of the block, and they go down and hook into just one single muffler and pipe coming out the back. It's not dual exhaust or anything.
And that is in the center. Is that the supercharger?
The supercharger's right here. Yeah.
Right in the center.
Right there.
Yep.
Below the carburetor, not like
they are today.
No, normally it'd be on the other side. It's a sucker, not a blower. That's what they call it.
And lovely chrome horns.
Well, yeah, that's a little added touch.
Oh, that is, okay. Not factory equipment. But it's also a front-wheel drive car.
4-speed front-wheel drive. Works on this little shifter here.
Yep.
That is electric over vacuum. And what you do, you pre-select the gear. So I select a gear for low gear, and I step on the clutch, and then I will go in gear.
Okay.
And then you shift the gear, and then you push the clutch, and it hopefully shifts into another gear.
I like your use of the word hopefully.
Well, I've had a few of those, and they give you a lot of trouble, but they're well worth the trouble that it gives you.
Sure, exactly. And it's got lovely engine turning on the dash.
Yeah, all the instruments look like an aircraft back in the day.
Yes. And it's a convertible.
Yeah, and the top hides away. When you flip the top up, this flips up like a Corvette.
Oh, okay.
Does, you know, most Corvettes lately, and this folds down and hides away, and so it looks much better with the top down. But
oh, yes, it does.
When you've got them judging you, they want the top up.
Yep. Yeah.
But
And is that the fuse box, or is that a little locking container or box beside the steering wheel there?
here, this,
Yep.
no, that's glove box on both sides.
A glove box. Isn't that remarkable? Isn't
On
that
both,
remarkable?
there's one on each side.
Well, Al, this is absolutely fabulous. I love the color, and I love this particular vehicle. So thank you for sharing your 1937 Cord 812 with us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for looking at it. I love it.
I'm with Peter Fawcett of Oshawa, and we have a 1903 Columbus Electric. Elon Musk, eat your heart out. This was 120 years ago. Peter, this is a fascinating car. It's amazing that they would have created an electric car so long ago.
Well, they had them before this, and don't ask me the exact date they started it, but I've seen quite a few. And they made these cars for people like, maybe I shouldn't say this, but for women and people who weren't handy at starting cars, but with a crank and whatnot.
Sure.
And you can put the key. The key is actually in my pocket. I took it out so nobody moves the lever and makes it go ahead into the water here. But that's basically the key.
Isn't that remarkable?
It's just a connector, really. It just goes in a little socket in here, and all of a sudden you can move the lever and the car will go.
Wow.
So there's 3 selections ahead for speed.
Yeah.
And they, like I said, they just basically made it for this, like for ladies who wanted to go shopping or whatever and not have to worry about starting a
And running around town.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, going to tea.
Or whatever, yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Now, the obvious thing that jumps out at me is the tires. They're white. Is that, I don't think most of the cars here have black tires.
They do, but in the beginning, like when they started making tires, the rubber actually comes out of the tree white. That's the natural color of rubber out of the tree. So they just used what they had. And after a while, they figured out if they put carbon black in the tires, in the rubber, it would last longer. It was all about making the tire last longer. So they reproduced these a few years ago, probably 40 years ago. Those are likely 40-year-old tires on this right now. And they stand up pretty well. The new ones, not so much. Yeah, anyway, we won't get into that.
We won't go there.
Yeah.
But what's remarkable about this vehicle is, well, where is the battery? Is it under this hood here?
There's both ends. This one's bolted down, but the rear, if you want to walk around,
We'll walk around, but let's...
I can show you. It opens up at the back, and you can. There's just two at each end. There's 4 big batteries, 12-volt batteries.
Yep.
And it's just a big truck battery is all it is. It's nothing fancy.
So you've obviously upgraded the batteries.
Well, the batteries didn't exist when the car was found.
Right.
It was they're lead acid, but they're probably glass. Glass jars and whatnot. And my father found this car, if you're interested, in 1957 in Kingston, Ontario.
Okay.
So it was bought new and used there. And it was willed to the electric company in town who looked after it for the people. And my father bought it from that company, like years later. So, like I said, 1957, and anybody looking at a thing like this was probably out of their mind, you know what I mean? But he paid $400 for this in 1957, and it didn't look like this, but it was complete. And I remember him bringing it home. I was just a young boy, and he put batteries in it, and it worked.
Wow.
It drove around. So it's been restored probably since the early 60s, and we painted it once, maybe 30 years ago.
Well, it's in marvelous shape.
Yeah.
I see it's got a chain drive to it as well.
Double chain drive, so there's a small differential that up ahead of the axle, and so it's like a buggy really with an electric motor under the front seat.
I see the fenders are made of leather.
That's right. I think they did that to make them light.
Okay.
Just for weight. That's my opinion of it.
Because normally it would be either wood or metal.
Yeah,
but
that's right.
Of course, the batteries would be heavy enough as it is.
Like they are today.
Right.
So the little body's made out of, this is all wood, all of it.
Wow.
And it's all steamed and shaped back then. So they call this a tulip body, this style.
Well, you can see the tulip shape.
Yeah.
And there's lots of brass. The headlights are brass, and there's brass, even the embossing here on the nameplate is,
Yep.
is
Little
brass?
nameplate on the dash, and if you can just see the two gauges there. There's a voltmeter and an amp meter, which is, and it does have electric lights. The little buttons are right here. They look like house lights.
They
almost.
do, don't they?
But they were way ahead of their time because they had the power.
Yes.
So they put the lights on it, right? So
The steering is interesting because it's not a steering wheel.
that's right, just a tiller. That's right. And you get in, you lift this up to get in by it,
Yes.
and tip down, and the controls here. This goes in there, and it doesn't have a horn. It has a little bell, and this lever you put ahead, and then I won't run over you, but it goes ahead, just like that. Simple as that.
Interesting.
And if you want to back up, you move the lever back and move the lever ahead again.
Fascinating, absolutely
So I
fascinating.
keep that in my pocket so that nobody moves the lever by mistake and it goes, because it would.
It even has, is that the brake?
That's the emergency brake, really, but today I just have a block of wood. So,
Right, but
yeah,
it's got even today, it's got a ratchet.
to hold it. And then you move this lever back to stop. There's a service brake, and that's the emergency brake.
Right.
And it has basically 3 positions ahead. So
What's the top speed?
I'm going to say probably, I don't know for how long, but it'd probably do 30 miles an hour. 40, yeah. It would surprise you.
I'm not sure I would want to be in a collision at that speed.
I think when this was on the road, there weren't many cars.
That's very true.
You know, you were probably the only one in town. So
Yeah. Yeah.
anyway.
Well, thank you so much for this. This is great. It's another very unique and special vehicle here at Cobble Beach. So
Okay,
thank you.
very good.
Thank
Good talking to you.
All right. I'm with Randy Gray, and we are looking at something a little different. This is a 1969 Mercury Cyclone Dan Gurney edition, and it's unique for in many ways, right, Randy?
Absolutely.
What makes this car unique?
The most unique thing is the front end. They've extended it, made it round, flat grille, flat bumper. Probably one of the most unique things is under here,
Right?
where they took this rocker panel and rolled it twice.
Ah,
They left this lip 2 inches long
yes.
because when they made them into NASCAR race cars, they could cut half this off, retain the original lip, and lower the whole car 1 inch.
Wow. So this was a street version of a
Yes.
NASCAR racer.
Yes.
So in 1969, now as I recall my NASCAR history, that was the day of Ford factory, Dodge, Chrysler, Mercury. They were running neck and
Yep.
neck, and it was big engines, fast cars at Daytona, Talladega,
Yep.
all the big super speedways.
Yeah, they built these bodies, the Mercury Spoiler 2 Cyclone and the Ford Talladega, to compete with the Superbirds and the Dodge Daytonas at Daytona and the super speedways.
Right, right. So this thing is a street version of a NASCAR vehicle.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
As I recall my history, there was an old saying back then, win on Sunday, sell on Monday.
Yep.
So this would be something that Joe fan could walk into their Ford dealer or their Mercury dealer and say, hey, I want one.
Yes. Yep.
So how many of them were made?
They made 218 of the Dan Gurneys and 305 or 306 of the Cale Yarbroughs, which are red on the top.
Right. So it's a little bit different and a lot more rare than
Yes.
your average Cyclone.
Yes.
Yeah. What's the engine in it?
351 Windsor.
Okay.
These cars had no options. 351 Windsor, FMX transmission, and 325 gear set, bench seat, no options.
Radio?
AM, no cassette.
And no cassette. Heater.
Heater, yes.
It came with a heater.
Yes.
Okay, well that's good. We needed that for the Canadian
Yes.
winter.
Yep.
Now, how did this vehicle end up in Canada? Could you order it from a Mercury dealer in Canada?
No, we've actually found it in a barn in Orangeville. I was looking for a car to rebuild and came across this. And I was always a fan of the Ford version, the Talladega Trino. I was a big fan of that when I was a kid. Never got one, could never afford one. So when this came along and I saw that what it was really what it was,
Yeah.
I have to have it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Now, what did you do to restore it? What
Everything.
condition was it in?
Everything, it came all apart.
Ah.
Motor redone, transmission redone, rear end redone. All the underneath was redone. Everything is new in the car.
The interior was also redone?
Yes.
Marvelous, marvelous.
Yes.
It's a fine example of this kind of vehicle that is rare
Yeah.
because they were made in limited numbers, but also a car of an era. Because let's face it, I'll bet you it runs on leaded premium gas.
Oh yes. Yes, yeah, and a lot of it.
I'll bet. I'll bet. I'll bet. And the spoiler that's on the back is basically an eyepiece.
Yes.
It's not functional,
Yeah.
really.
No.
Yeah. They threw that on just
Yeah.
because.
Yeah. And that was a dealer install,
Right?
so some of them didn't even get installed.
Right.
Some of them got taken.
Aha. Aha. They ended up on somebody else's vehicle.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to take a quick walk around and just to see what it's like. So,
Yeah.
Randy, thank you so much for telling us about this marvelous piece of automotive history.
No problem.
We're here with the 3 GM Firebird vehicles. Now these are really interesting, not because their styling is extremely unique, but they represent an automotive dead end. All 3 are turbine vehicles. That's right, they had modified jet engines in each of them. Turbines were thought to be a solution for horsepower and torque and high speed in the 1950s and 1960s. But unfortunately, they ate a lot of gas, kerosene. And they polluted a lot, as well as they had a problem with exhaust temperatures. And if you look at the rear of each of the vehicles, you'll see how big the exhausts were. These were experimental vehicles, and especially the Firebird 1, which you can see behind me in white, was actually the only one that went on the road. It reached a speed of 100 miles an hour when the driver said, nope, I'm out, and that was that. They did take it out onto the test track again, but very, very short life. So these are our styling exercises, these are experimental engineering vehicles, and a unique part of our automotive history. I'm here with Bill Halkew, who owns this very, very unique Mustang. It's a 1966 GT 350H, and the H has a special meaning, right, Bill?
Yes, it does. H is for Hertz. And we've all heard of the Hertz rental car company.
That's right, because these were built as rentals.
Absolutely. There was a special contract never before previously done in history and never repeated since that time when Carroll Shelby, the small auto builder out of California, entered into a contract with one of the largest rental companies in the United States and contracted to build exactly 1,000 supercars that would be rented at all of the major airport Hertz rental depots throughout the United States. So they built a total of 1,000 of these, and this happens to be one of them that has survived and is largely in its pure and original state.
And they survived because they were used in competition.
Absolutely. Well, they were not used in competition. They were actually used for rental.
Yes,
so
but...
any person could, you're actually right, because what a lot of people did during the weekend is that they rented these notionally to have a rental car, but then went to the track, and actually you're right. They were used in competition, informally, and probably extremely aggressively. So to find a car that is almost 60 years of age and is still intact is very fortunate and very rare.
Well, let's take a look inside, first of all, and have a look at this car a lot more closely.
Absolutely. So like I said, they built about 1,000 of these. This is car number 1998. And this car served in Phoenix, Arizona for a period of 1 year in 1966. So after that, it was owned by 2 other very, very caring and careful owners until it got into the hands of a gentleman by the name of Bob Jolly out of Texas in the early 90s. And what Bob did was virtually nothing with the car except all he did was paint it. And this paint job, which shows tremendously well, if I may be so bold as to say, almost about 33 years later, is the only modification to this car. And it is otherwise exactly the way it came out of the factory back in 1966.
And these were basically custom-built cars.
They built 1,000 of them, but the GT350s were special cars that were built in 1966. But the biggest contract and the largest use in 1966 was to fulfill the Hertz agreement.
Right.
So that was the big factor. And out of these cars, it's interesting as well, about 75%, which is to say, I'd say about 750 cars, were painted in the Hertz traditional brand colors, which are black and gold. And they had so many nice little elements, such as the wheel hubs, which essentially say Hertz Sports Car Club, and all of these distinctive Hertz features, such as having the H, which meant that it was a distinctive element in Hertz. So what happened after the 1 year that they served at Hertz's rental cars is that they made their way to the public, and essentially the rest is history.
Well, you can see that they figured something was going to be done, because you'll see that those are not your standard seat belts. Those are competition seat belts.
Yeah, absolutely.
And some of the little things are significant that it looks like a standard GT350, in that the quarter windows
Is actually plexi.
are plexiglass.
That's correct.
And the hood scoop.
Hood scoop is also, that's actually plexi as well. Yep.
And
Fiberglass.
it's got hood pins.
Hood pins, you just keep that hood down. Yeah.
At
You need the
speed,
pins.
you
Yeah,
need the pins.
Absolutely.
And those are racing tires, of course.
Well, those are back in the day, and you can see here the original tires were, and this is the original one, the Goodyear Blue Streaks. So
Yes.
these were the tires that you would actually put on the car, but they were just, your regular polyester by, the multiple ply or whatever. But these, of course, are modern radial tires, and they are, basically a tire that you drive on nowadays, which fits and works and will take the speeds.
And you can see it's got an electric fuel pump, which is not standard either.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You turn it over and you hear the clicking, which means it's working.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
So what I've done here as well is just the interesting thing about this car is I've kept very precise records of all of the original documentation from the factory, from new. So the beauty is this car is pure and it's completely documented from new, with full verification, certification numbers, and you name it. The original manual I got from the gentleman Bob Jolly, who bought it 30 years ago. And I was in touch with him. He wrote me a great letter and said, "Hey, Bill, I've got the original manual for you." So I went to SAC, which is Shelby American Automobile Club. I got verification of the authenticity as well. This came from Bob Jolly back in 1991. And I got a verification in February of 2006. And the wild thing about this is my son is a shadow judge doing the Mopar today. And back in 1994, when he was 3 years of age, I drove him around this car, and here's his rendition of the car when he was 4 or 5 years old. And here he is behind the wheel back in 2004. And here he is, he's grown to 6'9". He's a shadow judge now for Mopar, so it's kind of wild.
Who says cars are not and don't get into the DNA?
Well, they do. And these things are pretty interesting here because at the time, they had produced, Larry Gardinier is a famous artist who did these poster movie prints, had done this particular poster for this car. I sent it to Carroll Shelby. I said, "Carroll, write what you figure is appropriate for this car." And he wrote, "To Bill, live your dreams, Carroll Shelby."
Nice.
And I had the honor and pleasure of meeting Carroll Shelby along with my son and wife back on February 10th, 2010, at which time I had this poster, which was the poster that advertised this car back in 1966, and it says there are only 1,000 of these for rent in the entire world. Hertz has them all.
And that's also signed by Bob Bondurant.
It's signed by Bob Bondurant, Carroll Shelby, and Cleo was beside him, and he passed it over to Cleo, his wife. So it's kind of nice to have that little piece of automotive history.
Absolutely.
So unlike any other car here, this is very unusual because this is a rental car. This is not a prototype. This is not a restored car. This is not something neat that someone has conjured up. It's totally different. It's got historical significance.
Right.
And it looks cool.
Well, we were looking at some of the other cars from this era, and I noticed that all the people who are, I'm going to use the word baby boomers,
Yep.
Are actively interested in looking at these vehicles, because I'll be honest, I'm one too, and I'm reliving my youth.
Oh, of course, we all do that. You know, it's a fact of life.
I remember seeing the ads for this, and I said, I can only dream.
Yeah,
I
don't
can
you know?
Never knowing that, hey, it's
Yeah.
the real thing in the flesh.
And they did it 60 years later in 2006, or
Yes.
something like that. 50 years later in 2006, doing a commemorative 2006 that they sent to all the airports as well.
Yep.
That we saw but never leased out. But but it was never like back in the old days.
Yes, those days are gone
Yeah,
forever.
yeah. Well, we can relive them like this, so it's
Absolutely.
kind of a great experience.
Well, thank you so much for showing us this wonderful piece of
Absolute
automotive
pleasure.
history. So
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank
Much
you.
appreciated. Thank you. I'm here with Dave Marchioni, and we are looking at the 1963 Mustang II prototype. And the Mustang prototype is interesting because this is how car makers used to give us new cars. They tease us a little bit. And this is a real tease, isn't it, Dave?
It really is. If you think of the history of the Mustang, this car is a 63. So in 61, Ford produced a car called the Mustang I. Two-seater with a transverse four-cylinder behind the passenger compartment. And they'd been showing to the public for a couple of years as a Mustang. They knew what the end result was going to be, and it looked nothing like what they've been showing people for the last 2 years. So this car is what we call a bridge car. So this car was meant to transition the Mustang name to what they were going to build. So this car is kind of if you took a mashup of the Mustang I in the actual Mustang and showed her.
And in fact, there are bits and pieces from all over Ford corporate world that make it up, aren't there?
Absolutely, and in prototype cars, they like to keep cars corporate. So even in a car that's a complete speculation that they know they're not going to build, they wanted to have the corporate styling touches because sometimes they appear in other places.
Right.
So as we walk around the car, some of the dash pieces are T-Bird. So there's a lot of corporate items within the car, even as a show car.
Well, let's look at the engine first, because how much more Ford can you get than a Carroll Shelby built engine?
Well, one of the interesting stories about the car is it originally would have come with a 260. And if you're familiar with Falcons, if you look at the radiator, it's got a Falcon radiator, which is pretty small for a 260. We've got a bunch of footage of the car in parades. We know they drove it a bunch. So what my gut tells me happened is they probably over-temped it sitting in a parade, and the motor went. So Ford reached out to Shelby in 63, and if you think of Shelby's relationship to Ford in that era, they were pretty early. They called Shelby and had Shelby build a 289 for this car.
Ah.
So it's a cam, solid lifter, dual quad, low rise, 289. It still retains some of the show car pieces, although it wasn't shown with the hood open. And kind of with the amusing and the last minute things of show cars is if you look at the cover, it looks very fabricated. If you're familiar with these cars, the dual quad has a big aluminum cover for that. It won't clear the hood. So I'm sure what happened is they got the motor in it and they were getting ready to go someplace, and they went to close the hood, realized that it didn't clearance, so they had one of the fab guys make them a cover for it so that it fit.
And it's been here ever since.
It was donated to our museum by Ford in 1975, and the car has been unchanged to the very best of our knowledge since 1975.
Well, let's look at the interior, because
Sure.
it really does show that it hasn't been changed very much, if at all.
Yes, very much so. And it's tough in concours when you're between two beautifully restored cars to show a survivor. But I think as a museum car and as a survivor, there's some interesting pieces to the car actually appearing as it's used.
Yeah.
So again, if you look in, the door panels still have kind of the Mustang feel to them. But if you look at if you're familiar with the Mustangs, the doors are textured. These doors are smooth. The inset on the door is different. The pole handle on the inside is different. If you look at the gauges and some of the heater controls, those are Thunderbird. So it's still corporate pieces, but used within the car. Then if you pan back to the emblem between the rear seats, that's the only time that emblem appears. It's a 3/4 view of the horse running, and it was one of the ones they were using early on in the history of the car that never made it to production. So it's the only time that appears as a cast emblem.
And it does look like the bucket seat for the driver's side is well used and well worn.
Yeah, when we were showing this, another thing, I showed this car in Detroit, and a guy walked past it and he goes, "My dad used to drive this car."
Oh, wow.
I went, "Really?"
Yeah.
So he comes in the next day, and if you're older like me and remember when they used to bind your photos,
Yes.
he shows up with a little binder of photos, and it's this car in the driveway of his home in Dearborn. His dad was the vice president of marketing for Ford. So, and behind the car in the distance, there's a trailer, single car trailer that says, "See the new Mustang II." And the guy tells me, he goes, "You're gonna laugh, wait till you get to the last picture." We get to the last picture, and he's laying in the driveway with his Brownie camera on his chest to get the 3/4 low shot that you see in Motor Trend, and the tips of his Chuck Taylors are in the picture. So it's just a great piece of, you know, the great thing about being in Detroit in the automotive industry is you have to listen to people when they tell you these stories.
Yes.
Because a lot of these people interacted with these cars.
Exactly, exactly. Well, it's a living piece of history, and it's wonderful. It still runs?
It's a runner, but we're not driving it on and off here.
Right, right. So that's good. Well, Dave, thank you for telling us the story of the Mustang II. It's one of the key pieces today, and there are lots of more Mustangs here at Cobble Beach. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. You can visit us at DetroitHistorical.org, and a thank you to everybody from Cobble Beach who actually got us up here for this. We're very happy to be here.
Well, thank you. I'm here with Dennis Huron, and we have a Ford Model A from 1903. Forget the Model T. This is a good 10 years before that. This was one of the earliest Fords.
The
Dennis?
earliest Ford.
The earliest Ford.
First year Ford.
First year.
Yep.
Year one. So it's really, truly job one.
It is serial number 103 of the first Fords made.
Wow.
Ford started in June 16th, 1903.
And this was actually sent to Canada.
This exact unit here was one of 9 that were shipped to the Canadian Cycle and Motor Company in Toronto. They were a dealership. Which is CCM,
yes,
which still exists to this day.
Yeah.
As they were making bikes.
Yes.
And they were dealers for other cars, and it was shipped there. And my great-great-grandfather, who lived in Whitby, Ontario, went up, had heard about cars. They were the new things. He was a farmer. He went up to shop for a car, and he bought this car right here. So it's been in our family since day one.
That's quite remarkable.
It's quite a feat, really.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah, and it's the original price was what, $750?
It was $750 without the optional back seat that we have. It's $850 with the back seat.
Farming must have been very good in those days.
Something must have been good, for sure. Yeah.
Well, let's take a look at this vehicle.
Sure.
What are some of the unique features?
Well, okay, it is a gas-powered car. The engine is a twin-opposed engine running this way with the crank going in here. So we started here, right? Chain drive to an open axle. The only brake is within the axle. Brass car. The very early ones were very plain. They had no headlights. We've matched it to the original, one of the original pictures that we have. Low gear, high gear, but not gears. It's a planetary transmission, planetary drive. So moving this lever tightens bands around a drum to grab the transmission, and it is butter smooth.
Wow.
It is the smoothest transmission in this place.
Wow.
If I took you for a ride, you'd be blown away how smooth the shifting of the gears are.
Now, I've seen other cars from this era which had a lot of brass,
Yes.
but this does not. The fenders are black. The headlight, because there's just one, is black. The
Yes.
radiator is black. The upholstery is all black.
When this car was first produced, here is the road and track of the day.
Cycle and Automobile Trade Journal.
in June of 1903 when they started business. Here is the original ad for the car. You said it was a Model A.
Right?
It was, when it first came out, not known as a Model A because there was no B or C or D. It was produced as the Ford Mobile.
Ah.
Okay? It wasn't until they had more models they realized, oh, we gotta
call it-
differentiate
yeah.
something else, right? And I think there was probably some competition with the fact that Ransom E. Olds had the Oldsmobile.
Yes.
And he maybe didn't want to. This is my surmising. I don't know, but I would do the same.
Yeah.
From a few months in, I have other ones. It was actually known as the Ford. After that point, they dropped the Ford Mobile, and until sometime they said, okay, it's an A, et cetera, et cetera. So as you'll see, when it first came out, there was no headlights. It was very plain. It was very simple.
Yes.
Right. So later ads show it with brass handrails, headlights, etc.
So there were options back in those days too.
Well, I don't know that headlights were. So it's a very early serial number. So when it was purchased new, it did not have the headlights. It had a single light out front. I'm not sure if that came from the factory or if they installed it. But basically, we have recreated this car.
Wow.
Right, the car has all the original interior. All the seating has never been taken out of the chassis. There is original carpet in the back,
My goodness.
right? Which, if you look, you will see wear areas where ladies' heels will have worn the carpet to some extent.
Yep.
But this is all the original interior. It has the original license plates. It was number 145. They were the 145th license plate issued in the province of Ontario.
And no registration stickers either.
No.
But it has a brass
Brass light.
brass light.
Yeah.
And chain drive.
Chain drive.
So differentials, gear drives came along much later.
Yeah, but it actually has a differential. The axles are separate.
Okay.
Right? It's not a solid shaft, so it has a differential activity within it. Right? So the back passengers would enter through the back door.
Oh yes.
Okay. It was a little bit cramped, but I'm sure it was good. Right? As you see, the ladies are in there. It is all the pictures we have and the story from the original story we have that his daughters drove it most. Right?
Okay.
And on the two pictures we have, it is the ladies of the family who are driving the thing.
Yes. Oh my horrors. Ladies driving, what are we going to do? Because don't forget, in 1903, that would not have been,
It would be pretty progressive.
that would be very progressive.
Yes.
Those ladies would have been very, very forward.
Yes.
But,
And,
you know, a credit to your great-great-grandfather?
great-great-grandfather.
That he would allow his daughters
Yes.
to do that.
So at some point in time, it got old or broke, I don't know, and it got taken apart and put in a barn, right? Until it was my mother's side that had the car. And when my father met my mother, they got married. He was a car guy. He asked the family if he could collect up all the stuff and restore it someday. And so it finally got restored. We finished restoring it for the 100th anniversary in 2003. And brought it back to its original state. Right? Copied it with all the pinstriping is correct as it was on the car.
Yep.
And we're very proud of it.
And you have every right to be. This is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful example of very early automobile history.
Yes.
So thank you. Thank you for bringing it to Cobble Beach.
Oh, the pleasure's all ours.
It's
trust
a
me.
treat. All right. I'm here with Fred Pierce, and we're looking at an Amphicar. By the way, this car swims, as Fred will attest, right?
Absolutely. Swims and it sinks the odd time too. Sank twice.
But the Amphicar was a unique car of the 1960s, wasn't it?
Totally. It was invented by a guy named Hans Trippel that invented the swim wagon for the German army in World War II. And he thought the world needed something that could go in the water and on the highways. So this was the result. It's the only mass-produced amphibian in the history of the auto. They made 3,700 between 62 and 67. And there's about 600 left, right? 300 that are seaworthy. And this old girl loves going in the water.
Now, where do you take it?
2 years ago, it was a good year. It was in Lake Ontario, Simcoe, Couchiching, Bass, the Green River, 6 Mile, the Trent, the Severn, and Georgian Bay, and I'm forgetting a couple. That's one season.
Yeah, this vehicle seems to have an affection for water.
She loves it.
Yeah?
She just loves it. When Johnny bought it in '63, he had a cottage 8 miles from his house, but it was across a lake.
Right.
So it was a pain in the butt to get to. So Johnny bought this to save him time and loading the car, unloading the car, loading the boat. So he just drove across Lac St. Thérèse in Hearst, Ontario, and parked it beside the cottage.
Well, it works.
It does. It really does.
That's quite remarkable. You know, we think of loading the car for the cottage has a whole different meaning with the Amphicar.
Totally different. Totally different.
Well, quick question: do you have to have it safetied by the Coast Guard as well as the province?
You should. What I've got to do is I've got to have the paddle and all the safety gear when I go in the water, the whistle and the bailing bucket and all that sort of stuff. And I have to have a marine license.
Right.
So I keep 2 licenses with me, one on land till I hit the water, and then the other on my boat, so I've got to have a marine license.
Fascinating. Well, let's take a quick look around.
Sure. You know, little things like this on a car would be trim.
Right.
On this one, that's a bumper rail for docks.
Right. Just like a boat would have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And here, inside the door, you've got rubber trim to keep the water out. But whatever gets past the trim goes through these little holes into the bilge, and I've got 2 bilge pumps to pump the water out.
Interesting. Now, how is are there rudders?
Nope,
It's
it steers with the front wheels.
So the front wheels are the rudders
They
in a
are,
sense.
exactly.
Interesting. And the controls, looks like there's the standard
Yep,
shift, and then there's a...
On the floor, that's a power takeoff for the tranny. Down is forward, up is reverse, that's it.
Right.
But on the east side of Simcoe, for example, where it's shallow for miles, we run through there with the wheels going and the props going. So every time you hit a sandbar, the bow comes up and away you go.
A new definition of a wheelie.
A wheelie. That's a good one. Yeah, I like it.
And the engine is in the rear, just like the originals.
Well, you want to keep the bow light,
Right.
like on a boat. So yeah, and that when they built it, they wanted to use the Volkswagen motor, but U.S. marine regulations required water cooling. So you got a German car with an English Triumph motor in it.
Even more interesting.
Yeah. You think of Lucas, the Prince of Darkness around
Yes.
moisture,
Yes.
in the water.
That's right. Lucas Electrics hated the English countryside because they didn't like the water.
Didn't like water, and that's got Lucas.
It's got Lucas Electrics in it.
Yeah.
And this is the radiator here,
Yep.
and the air intake is nice and high.
Well, what they had to do was the guy was brilliant. He put the fins on the top, so
Yes.
all the water goes through here and down here through the rad into the bilge.
Okay.
And it gets pushed out here, which again is on either side of the motor, so if you get caught in the big waves, you don't have to worry about the motor getting swamped.
And it's got and the body panels are all metal,
Yeah, it's all steel.
so it's all steel.
Yeah. Just great for rust.
Fascinating. Yeah.
But I did a lot of rust proofing on it.
I'm sure. It even has Nerf bars.
Yeah, and the reason for the Nerf bars was if you have it near a dock, you can handle these things to help pull it around.
Okay. Makes sense. It's got a lot of little things that just make sense, don't
Just
they?
little things. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, if we go down below, we can see the propellers.
And they're nylon.
They're not metal, they're nylon, so that they can take a beating.
It's just amazing that this concept.
They can take a beating.
They can take a beating. Yeah.
I can see. I've seen the German Schwimmwagen from World War II in museums, and you can see the family resemblance. It's almost like this is the next generation.
It was. Triple invented the swim wagon for the Army and then came up with this.
Yeah,
Hans Triple.
absolutely fascinating. How fast will it go?
7 miles an hour in the water
Yeah.
and 70 miles an hour on land. And your 70 is limited by air resistance, because I can keep my foot to the floor on this old girl. She'll do 70, 75 and without straining it, really. Yeah. She's very civilized. One finger on the wheel at 65 miles an hour coming up on Friday.
And it's a convertible.
Boy, you betcha. I mean, you don't want to have a boat with a hardtop.
That's true.
Yep. Mind you, when the water is really bad,
Yeah.
I do put up the hardtop so the water goes over top like a submarine.
Right.
Yeah.
Have you had it in rough water like that?
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's-
Unfortunately,
I would think if you got cross wave, you'd be.
I tend to do a little bit of this maneuvering in the big waves.
Right.
Keep the bow into it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now you said you've been under the water a couple of times, or it has
Twice it sank.
Twice it
One
sank.
time there was an OPP sergeant on board. I'm not saying anything out of school here, but this was back in the 60s, and they'd had a few beers. And they were fishing north of Hearst, Ontario, way up in the bush. And the OPP sergeant opened that door to take a pee,
Oh my goodness.
and down she went in 8 feet of water.
Well, obviously it got recovered.
Yeah, it did, twice.
Yeah.
And my wife still remembers this car as a kid with grappling hooks on the back in the summer when the water was low in the rivers, trying to help the police get some drowning victims out of the river.
All right.
They could use this because of the wheels and the props, but they couldn't use the police boat.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you so much for the story of this wonderful and very unique vehicle, the Amphicar. Thank you for being
so
here.
much.
Thank
She's
you.
a ton of fun.
All right.
Cheers.
I'm here with Trey from the Stalls Automotive Collection of Chesterfield, Michigan, and we have got one of the stars of this show, a 1924 Delage with some absolutely incredible coachwork. Trey, what are we looking at?
So this is a 24 Delage with the body built by Labourdet out of France, called the Skiff Torpedo. This body designed to be reminiscent of the first body they built like it in 1911 for a race car driver who had this really sleek roadster built. But that car inspired the public to really fall in love with these wooden bodies. So they built many over those years, but this is the only one known to have ever been built on a Delage chassis. And it's one of very few surviving from this model as well.
Right. So it's what's remarkable about this, aside from the polished metal hood, which is absolutely will blow you away in the sunlight. In fact, we got to be very careful. What I find most remarkable is the coach work as we move down here, the amount of wood that is used here.
Yes. So designed along the same lines of a plane or a boat from this time period, named after a skiff, obviously. It has 3 layers of mahogany planking, very thin wood that is alternating diagonals, and then the final 3rd layer is on the outside here, which gives it these long lines over the course of the whole body. Now each section is anchored to the floor using these vertical uprights and copper rivets. So there are 3,600 copper rivets in this whole body to give it the rigidity of the structure of the actual body.
These are not nails, they're rivets.
Yes, you can
see on the far
you
side.
can see the beat-in other side of them on the inside of the doors and on the inside of the body there. So all of this framing is mahogany, just like boats of the time period would have been, and boats well into the 30s were, wooden boats anyway. So this model, the GL, which stood for Grand Lux, or Great Luxury, was Delage's best model they ever made. And an independent engineer was hired just to design this car so that it could compete with the likes of Rolls-Royce, Hispano-Suiza, and Farman. This thing is, only about 180 of these were built, and only a few dozen survive today. The only one with a Labourdet skiff body like this. Most of these cars are on very sedate sedan or limousine chassis, or limousine bodies that look relatively standard for the period.
The tires are massive. Why would they make such massive tires on a weight?
Well, the larger the wheel, the larger the tire. A tire is like a gear, just a large lever in a circular shape. So that gives you much more force on the road. You can get a higher top speed. So it gives you torque at a low gear, but also faster speed over the road at a higher. But the larger the tire, the larger the car, the more durable and the more rigid, so it all helps.
Right.
The dual spares here are part of the sports car aesthetic. If you're expected to really be cornering quickly, you need more than one spare. You don't want to run out of your only spare and then be going easy.
And I see they're branded Michelin as well, because Michelin were a French tire maker that has been in existence since, well, decades, centuries.
Yes. So this car very well could have had Michelin tires originally, even.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of little detail that makes a French car. You don't want to.
Right.
You don't want to have any other brand of tire on it.
And if we look at the inside, we can see that the dashboard is chrome.
Yeah, so that
metal.
is actually polished aluminum, an entire piece of aluminum there, much like the hood, but instead that's cast and then polished flat. And the floor as well, aside from where the carpet is, if you want to get in there, you can see more aluminum there. So almost all the metal on the car, aside from the brightwork, which is nickel, the rest of the metal on this car is aluminum. Aluminum fenders, aluminum hood, but it'll be nickel for all this trim and the windshield frames.
Right. And this is a spotlight?
That's actually part of an automatic dimming for the headlights.
Oh, okay.
That is not quite a period add-on, but oncoming headlights will naturally dim the high beams automatically.
And the mascot on the radiator?
So designed to be really inspired by the Rolls-Royce Spirit of Ecstasy. There's slight variations in it for Delage, but it's really meant to evoke that sense of class and elegance while being unique to Delage. And like a Rolls-Royce, the Delage, you have to turn the mascot so that you can clear the hood when you open the hood.
Ah, and speaking of which, can you open the hood?
Yes, I should be able to do that for you. There you go, you got a little 360. All right, now I can open the hood for you. So the engineer, Louis Delage, oh, did he latch it? That feels latched. There we go. The engineer that Louis Delage hired to design just the GL chassis for Delage was known for designing this almost jewelry-esque appearance to the engine and chassis. So even though it's something that's expected to get oily, dirty, and abused as it's driven, it still looks like $1 million.
It does, and it's very much a period. You'll see this kind of trim on many cars of this era. But I love the contrast in the use of metals. It goes from, I presume that's brass or bronze or copper?
Yeah, so brass. Brass plating might be on a different metal, but
right.
yeah.
And then on this side, you've got a cast block with polished metal rocker cover. But look at the engine turning right on the lower end of the block, right across the...
Yes, and all the way following this cast piece of aluminum, it goes all the way down to here.
Yep.
It gets a little tarnished depending on where the oil sits. But it is
After all,
probably hundreds of hours of work just polishing under the engine bay where there's nothing to be seen.
Right. It's amazing. It's amazing. Well, thank you for showing us this absolutely marvelous example of engineering and an absolutely classic car that I see has won an award here at Cobble Beach.
Yeah, second in our class today, which was pretty good for an almost about a dozen-year-old restoration we have on this car today. So.
Well, that's wonderful. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for showing us this great example of automotive excellence.
Well, thank you for the good questions.
Thank you.
Have a lovely day.
I'm here with Rob Goodwin, and we have a 1923 American LaFrance fire engine from the city of Owen Sound. It's fire engine number 1 from the city, but it comes from Grey Roots, right?
Grey Roots. It's an exhibit at Grey Roots Museum now. It was gifted to the museum by the city of Owen Sound, where our team of volunteers has spent the last 8 years putting it back into its current condition.
Yes, because I live in Owen Sound myself, I've been following this. Oh yes, I remember when there wasn't much to this but a lot of rusted parts.
There was a lot of bits and pieces that showed up. It was, as I understand, intact. The pieces were all there.
Yep.
It's just taken a lot of work to get it into its current condition, both from a cosmetic perspective and from an operational perspective.
Because it runs.
It runs, it drives, it stops to the best of its ability. It's not known for its braking power. But it does run, drive, and stop. All the electrics are fully functional. The pump is at the moment an exhibition piece. That's next on our list as we work through the balance of the restoration, is to see if we can determine if there's anything wrong with the pump and what we might do to make the pump operational. But,
I see it's a crank starter.
It does have a crank start.
But there's an electric starter too?
But it also has an electric starter. We currently started with the electric starter. We will at some point in time establish how well the crank start works, how well the decompression lever works so that you can actually crank it over. But it is electric start. There's a battery box on the running board. And it feeds the electric system.
It's got all the usual accoutrements of a fire engine, a siren with flashing red light and another siren up here.
The hand crank siren is original to the engine. The electric siren that's on this fender is not original to the engine. It was added at some point in time by the fire department. We think based on the look of it, it has a sort of a 40s vintage appearance to it, but that's not original, but it does function. It is connected to the system and works just fine.
And there's a lot of pinstriping on this. Was that on the original as well?
I believe so. I don't know that this is 100% accurate to the artwork that was on the truck originally. The lettering on the hood is accurate to the original, and from what we can see in the pictures, much of the gold leaf work on the hood and on the frame and fenders and so on. Whether the artwork is accurate or not, I don't know. It was done by a local person who was a retired teacher, as I understand. And they came in, and this is all hand painted.
Yep. Now it's a gas or a diesel engine?
It's a gasoline engine. It's a 6-cylinder flathead. It's a T-head flathead, so it has a separate camshaft for the intake and a separate camshaft for the exhaust. 855 cubic inches, or 14 liters.
It's a big engine.
It's a big engine.
But it had to drive a very big pump.
It had to drive a big pump. It was cataloged by American LaFrance as having 120 horsepower, and most of that horsepower would have been required to run the pump, not so much to move the truck. But
yeah, and the pump is here, and all the relevant hoses are here, and the bed would have also had
hoses and other firefighting tools and apparatus.
Yep. Yeah.
These hoses are intake hoses that would have been connected to the suction line on the pump. It was originally delivered with 4 hoses for the intake lines, and then the discharge hoses were all stacked in the back.
Yeah, and there's also the up here is that you can see there's the bell, which would have been rung as well.
Yep.
But the ropes to hang on.
Yes. for the poor guys who got the short end of the stick and had to hang on the back. The bell, I'll rotate the bell so you can see it a little bit better, has a beaver on it. And that is significant for the Canadian-built trucks.
Okay.
Canadian-built engines. The American-built engines and trucks had an eagle cast into the top of the bell. And this truck was assembled in Toronto.
Okay. American LaFrance at the time must have had a dealer or an office or a factory.
Yeah, it was their Canadian manufacturing facility was in Toronto. And that's where this truck was assembled, was in Toronto, and then delivered to Owen Sound.
Now you drove this out here to Cobble Beach.
We floated it out here on Stewart's Towing.
Yes.
Thanks to Stewart's K Towing for helping us get it out here. And then we drove it off the truck. So it does
run
and drive.
Well, I have seen it in parades.
We have, I don't know that it's actually been driven in a parade. I think it was floated in a parade a couple of years ago.
All right.
But our hope is to maybe get it out a little bit more often and let the public get a chance to see it a bit more often.
Good. Good.
Yep.
Well, we'll keep moving around here. Ladders, of course, which were critical.
Yep.
Wonder how many cats they rescued with those ladders.
I'm hoping not very many. I've had to pick those ladders up and put them up there, and they are extremely heavy.
Yep, they're good. They're long ladders, that's for sure.
Yeah, it makes you wonder about the sense in, attending a fire scene and getting out your wooden ladder.
Well, yeah.
Lean it up against a burning building to fight the fire, but that's what they did.
I remember an old fireman telling me that if they got a little too much smoke, they were told to go and sit off to the side and have a cigarette. Seriously.
And take a break.
Take a break.
Yep.
But that's you can see in there the massive pump and the pump gears.
Yep. And that's the pump drive. And then this handle operated the power takeoff, which connected the engine directly to the pump.
Yep.
And then you would have the transmission in neutral, and then there was a hand throttle that would allow you to power up the engine so that you could operate your pump with the truck sitting at the station on site.
And this was a working fire engine until when?
I don't know the exact date. I'm told, and this is subject to some proof checking, but I'm told it was the early 60s that it was still available for service. I can't imagine it was the first choice of the fire crews when they responded to a call, but that it was still available for service right up until the 60s.
Yep. Well, this is an absolutely fabulous piece of our local history, an important piece of our city history. So thank you for sharing the story of the Owen Sound American LaFrance fire engine.
Yeah, we're
number one.
We're thrilled to be able to get it out so that people can see it and come up and have a sense of the history that it represents. So we're absolutely thrilled to be here.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining me for the 10th annual Concours d'Elegance here at Cobble Beach. It's been a great day. Hope you've enjoyed all the cars that we've been able to profile. And yes, we'll be back next year. I'm David Shearman for Rogers TV.